Themes in games can be very important, but sometimes they can get a little dark. Let's talk about why. So, themes in board games, they kind of range when it comes to the importance of them. Now, I don't need theme to really be too seeped into a game, but a lot of times it helps. But why do we like dark, depressing, angst-ridden themes so much? Let's figure that out. So, when it comes to the dark themes, we're looking at things like war, death, apocalypse, all these other depressing times in history. Speaking of history, let's talk about Brass, for example. Brass is about the Industrial Revolution, a cutthroat, depressing, angry time that a lot of people would rather forget. But in board games, we love that kind of content. And kind of adjacent, we have London, for example, or London 2nd edition, whatever copy you have handy. They use poverty as a game mechanic. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that we don't want poverty in our regular days. So why, literally, we are using in this game, you use poverty and poor people in the game as the method in which you lose points. You got to get the poor people out of London. You got to get the poor people out of London, or you'll lose a lot of points. Dark, right? We as people love being engaged and immersed in things that are not what we would normally be immersed in. And that does not limit us to only wanting to be immersed in good things. I mean, come on, how many games are there about farming? And I don't just mean behind me. I mean, there are a lot. I've just probably played most of them. Do you want to go out and be a farmer? I didn't think so. But also, why is it that the dark, depressing runs are really the ones people go for? And not everybody. I know there's exceptions to rules and things like that. But you could slap other themes on things, but no, we're going on the depressing route today. So, Post-Apocalyptic, for example. Now, there's many post-apocalyptic games out there. The first ones that come to my mind are Arctic Scavengers and Wasteland Express Delivery Service, for example. Now, these games are about the end of the world, kind of. So the world may have ended, but what are you doing in that end of the world scenario? What is going on? How are you functioning? How is your society growing and building things? In Arctic Scavengers, you're buying all these cards to build your deck, and those cards are different, essentially, professions in the trying to survive category. Rogues, archers, hunters, they're people, just everyday people trying to live. And you want to know what it feels like to be immersed in that atmosphere, an atmosphere that you know is not really a possibility. And then you have Wasteland Express Delivery Service. It's a pick-up and delivery game where you're picking up and delivering things in the wasteland. Could they have put any theme on it? Probably. But they didn't, because it's more, oh God, what are you delivering? What is those random terrible things that you're delivering? That's why Fallout has such a great experience in the video game world of things, because it's just a world where you're doing things that would seem benign now, like delivering a message to somebody, but you're trying to not die while you do it, or delivering, or just going to shoot somebody. Things that you wouldn't normally do in today, but you want to be able to get into that. I mean, even death. I mean, I remember when I was first getting into Euro games and really starting liking, I got this game on sale because it was used for about $20, and it was Village. Village is still in my collection to this day. I think Village is unique and overlooked way too much because the theme is really dry. It's like you're in a village in a time that was far, far ago. But death is used as a mechanic in the game. There's an arguable reason to just kill your villagers off as fast as possible to make time tick forward. So you use your time as a mechanic to move forward, but every time you do, somebody dies. But if your guy dies, you can put him into the memory book that is the town's ledger and get there first until it fills up, because each spot can fill up pretty quickly. And then you'd have to go into an unmarked grave, which gets you no points. But if you're in the Book of Memories, it gives you points. So you want to maybe try to kill your guys off as fast as possible and get in the book while they're busy collecting resources and stuff like that. Using death as a mechanic and using it to your advantage. You want people to die. Or I want people to die when in a certain location. Not when they're at the bar, that's bad. But if they're in the, the political office, there's only one spot. And it's a way to use something that is so overlooked in games, and it's overlooked today. Because we don't even want to think about death. Death is not a fun thing to think about no matter what context you're using. There's no real, you can get really deep into it if you'd like to. There's no real world context where you're like, yes, death good right now. But let's pause on that realistically. But then the one game that really, frankly, was the inspiration for this video is a game I've played in video game form and in board game form, and it's This War of Mine. This War of Mine is a game where you're basically struggling to eventually die. A war happened, you're in war-torn Russia, everything's broken down, you're scavenging for food, you're trying to live to freeze. Sometimes kids come to your door and you have to shoo them away because that's another mouth to feed. You have to make some intense, scary decisions that have real-life implications. And yes, the video game is cheap, it's easy to find, it loses its appeal after a while. Because you read this journal in This War of Mine, it tells stories that are happening to these people that you're just trying to have survive. The goal of the game is to live. It's not to win. You're just trying to not be dead. It's a very big difference when you're trying to win a game versus when you're trying to make sure you just survive the game. And that's the intense grip of it. Our brains don't circulate these feelings on a daily basis because if so, we'd slowly go insane. Our ability to entrench ourselves in that world, once something bad happens, or a war-torn country, God forbid, or all these things, once these things happen in real life, it tears at us, it breaks us down. We have to really experience it and feel the hurt. So why do we want to put ourselves in that situation in a game that we're trying to do to have fun? This is not a negative thing. Wanting to do this, wanting to experience, or at least feel some semblance of something. Frankly, This War of Mine is dark. It is really tough to play for some people, and it's okay. Because being able to put yourself in that position, be able to put your front up, and if you really immerse yourself in the experience, some more than others, games-wise, of what you can immerse yourself in, it will make you have a sense of a dark place that you're not in. And then when the game is over and you put it away, yes, you're not in that world anymore. And that world may still exist in other places, but you don't commiserate, you don't understand what they're experiencing, but your brain got a hit of like being in that world. Now, I am not saying any of these themes, playing a board game, is anywhere near comparable to what actually happens in the real world. But let's look at what happened with recent events, and Pandemic is still a game. When you played Pandemic the first time, you thought, oh, look at this crazy world. There's no way. This is so intense. Imagine if that happened. Now, obviously, Pandemic or Plague Inc. and stuff like that, that's a dramatized view of what happened in our last couple of years of real life. But then, when those 2 years started, the first time you took Pandemic or Pandemic Legacy or Plague Inc. off your shelf and you put it down on the table, you had been like, oh, well, this is apt. And you say, oh, that's dark. Yeah, it is. Because that's a real world thing that, to a point, came to fruition. Not the same levels, obviously, in many ways, but it's our brains seek it to understand, whether we want them to understand it or not. That's just, we seek to understand and gain a better idea of what's going on around us. And even if it's something dark, fiendish, uncomfortable, it's something we seek out because it's something we don't know, something we don't understand, something we want to get a sense of. It goes from video games, board games, TV shows. How many movies are there about serial killers and gruesome murders? People go to watch movies for horror movies and all these things and terrifying things because it's so taboo in their mind. Because it's so out of your mind's reach in reality. It's all the way out here. It's not a thing that's currently happening to them. So, the Saw movies are a thing. There's so much across all types of media, including board games, card games, all these types of things. Darkness is only as scary as you make it to be. And yeah, I know you're probably thinking, Nick, it's just a board game. How dark and scary could it be? Play this War of Mine and get back to me. If you give yourself the opportunity, if you go into a game with a sense that you're like, going to keep an open mind, and even if you play Arctic Scavengers, you see the hunter. What is he hunting in Arctic Scavengers? Is he hunting rabbits? Because it looks like a snow-torn wasteland to me. So what is he hunting? Now, obviously, you have to put yourself in that type of mindset to be able to think about those things independently. And maybe you don't want to, and that's fine. But you can. And when you look at it in that rich of a detail, there's just some things that can get a little worrying. Now, does it make for a great board game? Sometimes. Frankly, quite often. But that doesn't mean anything about you. You wanted to experience this, that's cool. There are some games you just want to play, like Brass. Everyone loves Brass because it's a really good mechanically driven game, but it's about a very dark time. Sometimes that type of theme is just great for people. Now, I'm not talking about like the Cthulhu's and stuff like that. That's more fantasy horror and fantasy adjacent than it is darkness. What are some dark games that you're really invested in with a dark theme that I didn't mention that just like isn't cartoonish or really weird that I didn't mention? Tell me what you think, and how do you feel about these types of games, and can you really get immersed in the experience, or is it just, it's not that deep for you? Let me know in the comments below. My name is Nick, aka Until May. Thanks for watching.
Through the wastelands, through the highways, and